and I'm very honored to be with Oz. He's running for state senate, the 30th district. How you feeling, brother?
Good. Thank you for having me on, brother.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And what drew me to this dynamic brother is that I looked at his platform, and he addresses, as a black Republican, I feel like he addresses a lot of the community issues that I feel like a lot of other black Republicans are not addressing on a serious level. And like, for example, behind the scenes, we talked about the food insecurity problem. So
hmm
just for the audience, I'd like you to touch on the food insecurity problem and how you plan to address it.
So I want you to think about this. If you go to any suburban neighborhood, which are typically more predominantly white, right? What you're going to see is that literally, probably maybe about every quarter, half mile, you've got a robust supermarket, and not just regular supermarkets. You've got a Whole Foods. You might have a Wegmans. You have, a Giant. You have all these rich supermarkets. But when you come into our neighborhoods, when you come into the inner cities, and I'm going to give you the two examples here and then Chicago. In Chicago, I'm going to go back a little further. But here we have smaller grocery stores. Okay, so the grocery stores don't offer as much. Two is that we don't have the breadth and reach in terms of affordable food product
Right.
that you have in the suburbs. And third is that the stores are spaced pretty far apart. So you'll have entire areas that really aren't covered. Um, and so what this does is this puts us in poor nutritional. It's not just the issue of like economic hardship. We have nutritional hardship. We have structural limitations of access to resources, and then we have structural limitation of access to jobs. Okay, and if you're starting with poor nutrition, my biggest focus on the nutrition issue is that if you don't tackle that, okay, like Dapper Dan, for example, has a store up here, up in on Lennox, um, and I was talking to him at this diner that we both go to a couple months ago, and what he mentioned was there's these young bucks like 9, 10, 11, and the reason they get into gangs is because they're starving. Okay, because the food insecurity issues are that bad. Like what a lot of people don't think about, and this goes poor urban and this goes poor rural, okay, because they're identical across America. Because I was in Wyoming a few weeks ago and I was having this conversation with a bunch of Republican legislators out there. The problem is identical. You get into these smaller rural communities, you don't have just reasonable supermarkets. You don't have access to all the same foods, and at the same point in time, you may not have access to just like a lot of the services that you need to get there. And also consider this, right? So if the supermarkets are further away and they're not easy to access from mass transportation and things like that, well, you're only buying smaller things and taking smaller things home, so you can't really conserve money the way that you used to. And
Right.
then if you look at our shelter system and the problems that we have with the Department of Housing Services, and this is a big piece of my platform, is that we need to reform that, and we need to reform the child and youth services systems. Because, like, look, 4,200 parents have died, okay, and their kids ended up inside of some sort of foster system,
Right.
and you don't know what happened to them. Okay, so the relatives don't have an opportunity to adopt them. People aren't informed. And during the heyday of COVID, just a couple of months ago, I mean, people were losing their relatives right and left. And if you didn't claim the body inside of like 6 days, they were going into a mass grave. Or if you didn't have an indicator of religion on you, you
Mhm.
weren't even getting sorted. So, you look at this, I look at this as a culmination of problems, and it really starts with food, okay? Because if people can't afford to eat,
Right.
they get into the wrong things. If people are struggling for food, they're going to go and make the wrong decisions,
Right.
okay? And then I'll just, for example, like if you look on my website, we just launched the Ruby Wright job program. This is for the formerly incarcerated. As I walk around this neighborhood canvassing, and remember, my district's pretty large. Okay, we
Mhm.
cover wealthier white areas on the Upper East and Upper West Side, but we cover predominantly black and brown areas, and also American Muslim areas. The black Muslims go back, but they predate the country.
Right. Right.
Okay, I want people to kind of remember that. Um, and so when you look at these areas from like Harlem up into Cherry Hill, into Hamilton Heights, where I am, a lot of black and brown folks, and just like a lot of folks that just got completely disenfranchised by a lot of what's going on from the state level down. And so the challenges that I think that we have to look at are really what's the crux of what starts with food. Okay, like how do we solve these food insecurity issues? And I'm looking at it two ways. One is that there's plenty of state funding that can be brought in to work with the right CBOs to make sure that we're getting the right distribution to people. And then the other thing is I've launched or in the process of launching a nonprofit called harlemoz.org. And what we're going to do is I'm trying to bring food security with dignity.
Mm.
And so a lot of people don't want the free box.
Right.
They'd like to buy something. Okay, they'd like to let you know that
Right.
they are capable. They may not be fully capable, but they're capable enough to do things. And so what we're looking to do there is to provide subsidized grocery bags. You know, what we're working out the costing right now. It's between 10 and $20, but it'd be like 7 pounds of fresh chicken, seven
Right.
pounds of grain, 7 pound of bean, whatever. It could be split peas, it could be kidney beans, something like that, and then maybe about 7 to 10 pounds of fresh vegetables. So that's enough for two people for a week.
Mm. Now, when you talk about the food, are we talking about like a food co-op where people are able to buy in bulk at a cheaper price?
It's a
Like,
it's a packaged food co-op to start. We're going to have to get the infrastructure and everything else in, but the goal is like how can we do this like socially distanced with drop-offs and this and that and build it with a minimum infrastructure, right?
right.
So all I have everything shipped on demand. We do all the sorting and everything, and we run deliveries, and we do it once a week. So we're getting all of that ramped up right now, and that's regardless of what happens politically with me. But my goal in terms of like running for office is like, look, if we can solve these food issues because they're bad, okay, and if COVID comes back and it looks like it is in the middle of winter,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about the difficulties we're going to have. Like I go shopping, and thankfully I've had the blessing and the grace of God to, actually be doing pretty okay. But there's a lot of people, and I'll just see them. They're standing there, and they're like, and you can read their face. It's like, can I afford this or can I afford that? Because I can't afford both.
Right, and they got to choose
Hmm.
between. And what's interesting is about the food issue, and why I brought it up first is because we all know that food is the engine of life, and
Correct.
like it connects to another piece of your platform. Because if you can't afford food, then the other portions, like on your platform, you speak about community banking, right?
Hmm.
uh, are not flourishing in food, they won't have money to save to do all the other. Because you hear on the news everybody talking about entrepreneurship and all that stuff is great, but if you can't tackle the food, how are the people to get the money to even want to start their own enterprise? And then, like you said, the community banking portion,
Right.
the community banking portion of it is that how do they even go on about getting a loan? So all of these
Hmm.
things are interrelated. And I want you to branch off for a second and talk about community banking, because I don't hear a lot of Black Republicans talk about community banking. So,
Look, the 1994 savings and loan crisis gutted, and most people don't remember this, gutted the banks
mhm,
in all black and even white communities across the nation that were smaller. So all of your community banks basically went bankrupt
mhm,
because of a savings and loan scandal. And so these things haven't been replaced. And like when you have the CEO of Wells Fargo saying some bullshit like, there's no black talent to be. I've looked everywhere. There's no black. I cannot hire any blacks. I can't hire any. There's no brown people. Like like you have to sit there and just be like, please. Um,
yeah,
when you have this from the large banks, you realize that what's necessary is it's not just credit unions, which we have a fair amount of. You need a community focused bank, and we've had a number of initial conversations. I'm bringing a crypto bank in. So it's going to be a cryptocurrency bank. Now, let me explain that one. Let's say that you're formerly incarcerated, okay,
mhm,
which is, I would say it's, if I've got 434,000 people up here, 209,000 registered voters. I'm going to say I've probably got about 60, 70,000 people that are affected. Are you aware that unless you finish all this stuff, and sometimes people don't, you can't get a bank account, you can't get an ID, you can't get this, you're limited in terms of job opportunities. So the idea that we have is with the crypto bank, I can open bank accounts for the formerly incarcerated. Okay,
Right.
because that's a new area of banking law, and it doesn't have the same strenuous regulations that the bank that the commercial banks have. In terms of the community bank that we're trying to bring in, and I'm talking to a couple different groups right now, and our goal is to get that in by like fall of 2021. One of the groups is Adams International, that I can talk about. The focus has to be this. Um, it's not just that like your savings are protected and you feel like you can put your money there, because in between, like, listen, the Latino communities and the abuelas who have like 10 grand sitting underneath a mattress, and then like the older black communities who just don't trust banks, and then there's a lot of black and brown communities that just don't trust banks.
Right.
They've seen this stuff happen. They remember these scandals. They remember when FDIC insurance, which was supposed to cover them, didn't cover them, and their
Right.
money just disappeared. Um, the idea is to have something where the community can actually own a portion of that bank, or the corporation that's set up in the community, to operate that banking infrastructure. So we can,
Right.
maybe even 5%, but people own that. Okay. And then at the same point in time, what we're trying to figure out is new and innovative ways for lending, in the sense that people could be looked at a little bit beyond just their credit score. Because think about this: if you talk to most brothers and most sisters in our communities, okay, they need maybe like 10 to 30,000 bucks to start something, and that could be like, this one sister started this, delicious, like, very calorie heavy, but like a pie company, right? And she was doing, up until COVID, she was doing pretty well. Barbershops, um, hair salons, and then even like the juice bars, real popular right now. Just these smaller businesses that participate in the community, that give back to the community, that that have members of the community that are there. Like, I met Loon, and I've been rapping with him because I met him at the Uptown Juice Bar,
Mm-hmm.
and we connected because we're both Muslim, and we connected, in a variety of other issues, but just talking about like how, like, I just want to fix this area, because, like,
Right.
look, Harlem's like it feels like home,
Right.
and people kind of care about each other here, and it's not like a lot of other parts of New York. It's definitely not like Williamsburg, where people just turn up their nose at you all the time. But it's got this character, and it's got this complexion that like we can kind of build from. But the food issue needs to be addressed, and we can address that from legislatively. We can address that with nonprofits. The
Right.
banking issue needs to be addressed in terms of bringing allocatable capital and available capital to our markets for people to borrow. Okay, because in most cases, like, what are you going to do? Go to TD or Chase, and they're just going to look at you the wrong way because you're the wrong color.
Right.
Um, and we've seen these problems. You've seen the complaints filed over and over and over again. I'm not even going to talk about Wells Fargo because, well, apparently there's no black or brown people to hire, according to their CEO. Um,
Well, cut you off. That comment. The reason why I want to go back to the comment, when I first heard that comment, for me it triggered this space where the bank is not in the people's business anymore. And you and you see, remember when, okay, when Trump and everybody passed the stimulus, or the CARE Act,
Mhm.
and people were getting the stimulus money, and we're supposed to give out the money to these small businesses, but these banks turn around and only give the money to the sure thing, the big business.
Yep.
So even under crisis situations, they're not even the people's business. They're thinking about, how can I get return on capital? Because you see it,
No,
because
they were collecting processing fees for processing those loans. It was the only time that I've ever seen bankers at Bank of America, a couple other banks, available on the weekend. You can call them. They're picking up like, why are you picking up on a Sunday? PPP loans.
yeah, but it's really shocking, because you have small businesses that, because of this pandemic, they'll never open up again,
Yep.
and PPE was supposed to go to those people to give them a lifeline. Then you see Roof Chris, Shake Shack, they're getting
Mhm.
$millions, and you look and you like, don't you realize? And this is not something I'm saying. This is something that's rooted in fact. Small businesses are the business. They the ones that do most of the hiring. Most of
Yeah.
the people that work for a small business. They don't work for Wellington and Fargo Inc. and all these other big ones. They
Mhm.
work for the local guy that's trying to feed his family, that's trying to help the next guy to feed his family. And to see that these banks are not no longer in the community people's business, it's no wonder why there's an anger in the community. right?
Well, and this is one of the issues of contention I have with the guy I'm running against, the incumbent. Okay, so Brian Benjamin has actually recently been handing out money to certain businesses, but these are the new posh businesses that have come in. All right, it's not going to the old stalwart businesses that have been here for a long time. It's not going to the like regular black businesses, the regular brown businesses. It's going to this new gentrification looking stuff. And I'm
Right,
like, the focus of New York should be helping us maintain and build our communities. And
right,
what we have is we have elected officials that want to do the exact opposite of that. And at the same point in time, we've had all of this federal money that has come to Albany that all of a sudden it's like, well, you can't apply for it, you can't find it, you can't get access to it in terms of the state funds that were supposed to come in for everything from community centers down.
right,
It's just not available. And then I'm going to tell you, they've tried. I've had tons of my people on my campaign and a few other folks trying to contact the incumbent. He's not there. I saw him at Al Sharpton's birthday party because look, we work real bipartisan up here. We work real bipartisan. Okay, we support everybody. You know why? Because it's the community. That's what people forget. People get caught up in the politics. I'm a Republican. I am very much states' rights, and you know where I stand on things because I got all my issues laid out. And I was just at the Beretta Gun Store because what we're going to do is do a partnership with the National African American Gun Owners Association, and try and just educate people. It's like, look, you have the same rights as everyone else out there. Okay, but the challenge that I have to a lot of these politicians, why I'm asking people to support me and vote for me, is that they don't care about you. They just care about the crony politics that they're working with. I mean, Benjamin received $70 million in tax credits for the Genesis company that he has a partial ownership stake in, which was supposed to retrofit 352 cost of about 200,000 per housing unit. Okay, how much of that money went to create jobs in this community? No, it went to bring in, Russian and Polish contractors from outside of the neighborhood so that, yeah, okay, you got $200,000 to retrofit each apartment. They probably paid out 50, they pocketed 150.
right,
So how exactly does this help us? How does this
right,
help the community? How does this build more housing? And then you look at the housing that he's supported coming in. It's all these McMansions in the sky, and it's all this stuff made with spray concrete and spray insulation that's going to start like falling apart in about 15 years.
right,
Um, I mean, how do you erect a building like that in 3 months? 8 stories up in 3 months, right? And you're creating a situation where it's the housing is not affordable. You're not solving the core issues of the people. You're not bringing jobs. I mean, look, I sit as an advisor to the Opportunity Zone project, right, in the federal government with the Council Exchange Board of Trade. And one of the things that I've been looking to do is like, all right, how do we like bring not just job training, like the
right,
job training pieces. I've worked with the City University of New York. I've written portions of their cybersecurity programs. I've worked with IQ4. I'm trying to bring in like the opportunity for getting kids through a capstone, and I'm like, okay, cool. Now I can put you in like $20 and $30 an hour jobs.
right,
Okay, just in terms of internships, it's like how do we give the come up to that next generation? That's the stuff I get excited about
right,
because if you think about this as a template, right? You just think about the area as a template. And I'm like, okay, if I can fix the food and I can solve some of the job and the training issues, and then I can go in and we can kind of figure out how to restructure some of the housing. Because guess what? We also have thousands of empty units up here. Okay. And stuff is for sale all over the place. And we're facing a mortgage collapse that no one's talking about.
yeah,
Because right now, commercial and residential housing, there's a rent moratorium, and you can't evict people. You
right,
can't evict them until January. Well, guess what's going to happen in January? Okay, between January and March, all those mortgages that people can't pay or restructure or refinance, they're going to start collapsing. And
right,
once those start collapsing, then everyone's going to get evicted, whether you like it or not. And if Trump has his way, and I personally think that it should be a policy, something that's like, all right, no one's really going to like this, but we'll give a subsidy to basically cover your mortgage and we'll negotiate with the banks, okay, for the period of time to solve housing issues for some people. We'll bring training and some other things in. So if they're going to participate in the program, They have to do something if they're not doing something. Let's find a way to get you in a job, okay? Because there's millions of jobs out there where I think there's a, I call it the glass ceiling.
Right.
Like if I go into the inner city schools here and I talk all the time, they bring me in, but it's crazy because it's a room and they're like corralled like animals. They're not really treated well, you know.
Right.
And you look at the books they have and this and that. And I talk about cryptocurrency and like a bunch of other things like new industries. But if you were to give them these sponge like minds the opportunity to understand that, like, here's 5 different industries. Let's go cybersecurity, managed hosting, let's go cryptocurrency or blockchain development, and then
Right.
I'll pick like 2 in health med, you know, and say here's 5 different industries you can get into. And all of these industries have jobs that pay $60,000 to start.
Mm.
And you don't need a degree. You need to go through like 12 to 18 months worth of training, and then you need to go through some certification. Everyone's going to be on board for that.
Yeah, I mean, not to cut you off. A lot of it has to do when you talk about the inner city kids. A lot of it has to do with actually introducing the idea, because
Yes.
because
Yes.
I know you know this because you're a little older than me. When I grew up under like the Jesse Jackson era when he told
Hmm.
people the way to middle class for a black man is a city job, and my father was a bus driver. So when
Hmm.
I didn't know about all these skilled labor jobs. You know, when you grew up, they tell you when you're 18, take that city exam. You know how it is.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you get on the union board, and that was your path to the middle class. But
Hmm.
now the labor market is so tight, we're realizing that we, as like you said, the colored people, melanated people, we have to branch out into welding. We have to
Hmm.
branch out to carpentry,
Yeah.
ANC, electricity, plumber, all of these other industries, like you said. If the awareness is there, it's open to us as a not breaking the old paradigm, because like I said, I grew up under the old paradigm. You get your city
Hmm.
job and you just kind of float in that space, and I see you trying to break out of that old paradigm. It's a good thing.
You have to, because here's the thing: the cities are bankrupt. The city jobs aren't always going to be there. The expectations are different. If you talk to younger millennials and especially Gen Z, they want more out of life. No one believes in this, like, slave labor type. Like, not, it's not 9 to 5. They called it 9 to 5. But most of these
Right.
jobs, they want you working like 9 to 8. So when do you have time for your family? When do you have time for this? And then you also have to consider how much transit's involved, even in the city. Most people transit, like 40 minutes to work
Right.
each way. So again, like in between eating and showering and a few other things, like the quality of life isn't there. And what people have seen inside of the information economy is that you can work remote, you can bring in a fair amount of money, even in the gig economy. Like I have a video I recorded. I have to put it up. My friend Alexander Fazzulo, in 4 years, crested $1 million just working on Fiverr. Okay. And what I keep telling people is that, like, and this is what we're going to do with the nonprofit, is some education into, like, look, you have intrinsic skills. Maybe you know how to edit photos. Maybe you know how to do some video editing. Maybe you can do really great copywriting. Maybe you can write content. There's tons of gigs out there, Upwork, Fiverr. There's a ton of these different sites that you can go and sign up on as a freelancer. Okay. And then you basically market yourself and you go and find these jobs, and the jobs could be, you initially, maybe you get 4 jobs a day. It's 20, it's like $5 each, $10 each. But as you level up, you make more. And so now she makes about, $100 a gig. Each gig takes her maybe about an hour, and she does 10 gigs a day. She's making $1,000 a day.
Right.
Okay. And now you have to handle your own taxes and this and that. But that goes to financial literacy, which is a big core tenet of the stuff that I'm pushing out there. In addition to bringing the community banks in, we have to push financial literacy, because if you think about this, it's like the lack of home ec, the lack of basic financial education. We have kids that will go and inherit money or make money, and then they'll go and buy a Maserati. And I'm like, okay, do you realize you just put 86,400 in an asset that's not going to be worth more than 12,000 in 5 years? Why don't you just go and lease that thing? You live in goddamn New York, and it's not like you're driving 10,000 miles a year.
Right.
You're probably driving from like here to Queens and
Right.
back. But you know, you could be paying, I think, what's the lease on that thing? It's like 648 to 849 a month. Okay. So instead of putting almost $90,000 down, you could be paying um, less than 36,000 for that vehicle for the period that you want to have it as a lease and turn it in.
Right.
And everything's covered. The maintenance is covered. All this other stuff, but we just don't teach people this. And
Right.
then generational wealth. You know, my friend Mitzi Perdue wrote a book on generational wealth, and I'm trying to bring this stuff in. If you explain, and I've explained it this way: every person, every melanated person, should buy a piece of property.
Right.
And the reason for this is that one, it's considered stabilized rent for 30 years. You're paying the same price for
Right.
30 years to live there. But two, anything happens to you, you got some family issues, you need to do a little travel or this or that, you have an asset that you can borrow against. You can go to the bank and be like, hi, I need 10 grand. And they're like, do you have an asset? And it's like, I have this house. And they're like, fantastic. We'll give you a line of credit on your house. We'll give you a decent interest rate, da da da. Because you have clout. Okay, you have that available capital. But these are the types of things that I want to bring into the community. And then just from a policy perspective, you've seen everything that I stand for. It's the jobs and the job training, right? And then it's tying into a lot of the federal programs that I can bring in, the op zone stuff. There's the housing, which is, you know, again, making sure that people can afford to live here because they keep pushing people out.
No.
What are you gonna do? Push people up to Yonkers?
No, no, that's true. And because of time, I think we're going to touch on two more subjects. But real quick, that financial literacy is so important because just from a personal perspective, I remember when my grandmother, God bless her soul, she passed away, and
Hmm.
nobody had any money. But luckily for me, you know, I'm big on stocks. I'm like a stock guy. So
Yep.
I had 401k and stuff. So when she died, I just made the call, say, hey, listen, this emergency circumstance. Grandmother just died, then boom, got a check for like 8, 9 thousand. But I was building those assets. Like every check, I'll take out
Yep.
$40, $60 and put it into a stock so that when I face hardship, it was there for me.
Yeah.
So it actually worked out, and those things are important. But just for time, real quick, I want to talk about your opponent because I looked up a little bit of what he's doing. Like for me, because like I said, I'm in New Jersey, but I grew
Mhm.
up in New York. And when I was growing up in New York, what I remember is, you know, Harlem was the place that had soul. It felt different.
Exactly.
The air, the people dress, you know, was different. And that's how I grew up. And it seems like your thing is, I want to preserve this legacy. And his
Yeah.
thing is, he wants to bow to corporate interests and he doesn't care about. See, the thing is, you could live somewhere, but just because you live in a building doesn't make it a community. Those
Hmm.
legacies make it a community. Like in Harlem, you can go back to the Harlem Renaissance, jazz plays, all of the
Exactly.
what makes it a community. And you have a lot of these politicians, they don't care about the legacy that they're leaving for the community and what
Hmm.
Harlem represents. It's like you said, you have all these, you know, gentrifiers, and it's like, okay, what about the black, just to bring, what about Sylvia's, right? Or
Yeah.
Martin, the Red Rooster, you know, all of these traditional, like you said, black restaurant or Melba's. Mel,
Hmm.
you know, you have all of
Yeah,
these.
you know, he stood in front of Melba's the other day while he's running against me to announce that he's running for controller. And he said that the only thing he cares about is controller. So I'm like, if that's the case, step out of the way, endorse me, maybe we can work together. But the problem is that I know that the guy, look, this is a guy who acquired most of his properties when he was on the land and use board. That's a conflict of interest. So how are you going to go and be controller if you're already doing financial impropriety over here?
Right.
You know, these are huge questions that I have for him. I try to have. It was funny. We're scheduled for a debate on MNN. He backed out last minute. You know, I don't think he wants to address any of these things, and he just thinks that like they're going to smooth into this stuff.
Right.
Um, but this is he's not helping the community. Period.
No.
This community. I'm just going to ask everyone out there: if you live in this community, is your life better in this community than when he came into office and was appointed? Okay, he was originally appointed a couple years ago, and he ran unopposed last time.
Right.
And it is the goal to allow people's unbridled ambition to you know move themselves politically inside of spheres that only control money versus moving the ambition to help people, because
Right.
that's my ambition.
Right. Right. No, that's definitely. And just one more thing because we press for time. I just
Mhm.
bring this up because this is very important. Most people don't know this. Some people do. You know, you are the chairman of the Harlem Black Republicans Club,
Mhm.
and most people don't know it has a rich history. And I feel like you bring a lost art to Black republicanism, which is activism. You know, it's
Yeah.
like we're in this space where it's a lot like a lot of new Black Republicans, but the thing is that to be the influencer, right? And nobody
Mhm.
wants to do the groundwork anymore. Nobody
Yeah.
wants the food drive. Nobody wants to shake hands and hand the book to the kids. Like that's because it's like we want this influencer role. We don't want to do the groundwork that's gonna hook us in with the community. And do you know when I went to NAACP event in my home.
Mhm.
We also have the NAACP, and I was talking to them, saying, "Yeah, I'm Black Republican, but listen, I got this going on. You know, I want to get involved." They looked and they said, "Wow, you know, like I can get with you." And a lot of the
Mhm.
stereotypes that you see on Black Republicans fall off because people want to know that you have the community's best interest. And I feel like
That's it.
that
That's it.
that Harlem Republican Club and that lost art of just Black Republican activism is kind of disappeared, like getting your
Mhm.
hands dirty.
Look, we've done at least 4 food drives since I started my campaign. I'm talking to Gail Brewer, who's our Manhattan Borough president. Like I said, we work bipartisanly, okay, about how I can get some of those resources into the charity I'm setting up so that we can set up more distribution.
Right.
And at the same point in time, we're starting to build. We're going to have district leaders fully represented, the entirety all the way up to through Hamilton Heights. Okay, so that's a lot. That's a lot of territory, and that's ostensibly almost 1 million people. And the goal here is just to basically build in the next couple of years. We're trying to get more folks into office, but our intent is not people who are just there to politically climb. Our intent is like, how do we look at this from the perspective of people who want to make change and actually care about the community? Because there's a lot of hot talk out there. You can Google me. Look at what I've been doing for 15 years in New York. Okay. If it's not interfaith, it's getting involved in the community. If it's not anti-human trafficking, it's focusing on job development. These are the things that I've worked on. But the reason I'm running is because if you elevate it to the level of being a state senator, well, there's a lot you can do. There's a lot of resources you can bring in.
Right.
And being a Republican, I can work well with Washington, because I'm going to tell you, I personally think that Trump's going to win. And I'm telling people, if you don't like Trump, take a look at Brock Pierce, okay? Because Biden, the 94 crime bill, the 96 crime bill, I mean, just too many people that have been put in jail unnecessarily. And Kamala, she was putting moms in jail, okay, over truancy issues when other parents could pay a fee and didn't even have to deal with the issue. I
Right.
just I just cannot in good conscience look at any politicians who have done this systematically over 30 years and are now are saying, no, 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 we care about you. Come here, let me kiss your baby, Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot, and the thing that gets me as far as the whole Biden thing is just that at least tell the people the truth. They come in, they got this whole narrative about we're gonna make people pay their fair share and basically ride the anger of people. And I see this through years. It's like hook, line, and we're gonna make people pay their fair share. And you're lying. As soon as you raise taxes, we all know secretly who gets hit hardest when tax raised. The middle class. It happens all the time.
No, do you know who's going to get hit the hardest? See, they're saying that they're only raising taxes on people who make over $400,000, and that tax bracket's going up to 62%. But here's what most people aren't thinking about: most sole proprietorships, okay, are not incorporated corporations. This is the guy that owns the barber shop. This is the person that owns the beauty salon. This is the person that owns the juice bar. They own the cigarette vending company. They own the bodega. They own these types of things. Do you understand that if they're not set up as a corporation the right way, that they're going to get hit with that 62% tax?
Mm, mm. But
It's going to disenfranchise or communities that are already disenfranchised in the name of taxing the wealthy, when people just don't understand. I mean, we don't have that kind of institutional knowledge that comes in, and so I don't see how this is going to help us. And then I just take it to 50 Cent and Ice Cube. Ice Cube presented the opportunity um, to basically work on fixing big pieces of Black America to the Democrats and to the Republicans. And you've heard this from the Democrats every single time. We'll address that after the election.
Right.
Okay. Trump changed the platinum plan. He's like, these are good ideas. Let's just wire them in. Done.
Right.
Okay, this is what we're going to do now. We're doing it now.
Right.
Okay. And that's the really the consideration that I think people need to think about. You know, you might not, both politicians might suck in your mind. Vote for what's in your best interest. And what's in your best interest is what's going to put money into your community.
Right. Right. No, that's definitely true. You know, I just want to encourage everybody, you know, if you're in New York, please vote for this man.
Thank
State
you.
District 30. I encourage, matter of fact, all my new Black Republicans, if you're in New York and you're somewhere near Harlem, please get a hold of this brother, because I really feel like a lot of the young Black Republicans coming, they need to get their hands dirty. They need
Mhm.
to do these things, because like I said, I'm on Facebook, and I'm not trying to shade anybody. I see a lot of people at the rallies and stuff, and the rallies is cool, but then they come back from the rallies and they go, "Hey Dave, I'm just trying to wonder, how do we get the Black community to help us?" And I'm standing, I'm like, this is how you do it.
Yeah.
People see that you care about the community, because if you're at the rally and people are hungry for food and you're not addressing their food shortage, well, you're not going to get much respect from a rally, right? Sitting in front of
No.
a. So, you know, this is the type of conversation that needs to be had. Like I said, everybody that's in New York, please vote for this man. All my Black Republicans, if you're in New York and say you're floating around and you're like, I want something to get into, please, you still have the Harlem Republicans Club. I'm pretty sure there'll be
Yeah,
more.
you could reach out to me on Twitter. It's Oz at or sorry, it's at Oz Sultan on Twitter. You can also hit us at Oz for NY. We're redoing the Harlem Republican website and a few other things. We just actually reelected a new board. So it's myself, India Kirksey, and Luisa Flores. So you have Black and brown representation kind of across the board. And we've got Christian and Muslim representation inside of there too, which is really because people don't know that about Harlem. Harlem's like maybe about 20% Muslim, and it's Black Muslim, it's indigenous Black Muslim that goes back, you know, over a century. Okay, and people don't put like two and two. Malcolm X, you know, met with Fidel Castro in the Teresa Hotel, which is right behind my office. Okay, it's like about over there. You know, you have this rich legacy, this rich history that's here, and that's what we kind of need to preserve. Okay, because if you let this turn into Williamsburg, which is what my opponent is trying to do, then what you have done is you have railroaded and you have bulldozed the last great American Black edifice that exists.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, and for a long time, Harlem was definitely known as the Black Mecca at one time.
Mhm.
Black Mecca. So it's very important. Like I said, we definitely press for time, but like I said, State Senate District 30. You want to vote for somebody that's gonna address the food issue, that's gonna address homelessness, that's gonna address community banking, and like you said, bring a certain quality of life. So, like,
Exactly.
yeah. So all of the people that's watching, if you haven't watched it, please go back and watch this, because this is very important. And I want to thank this brother for taking his time. You know,
David, thank you.
this is much needed. And I thank you for coming on. Appreciate that.
Thank you. God bless.